Hello, 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 hello. Welcome in, welcome in, welcome in, everyone. Guys, it is time for another edition of Long Winded Donnie Review. Yes, another absolute, you know what? I don't even want to call it what it is. It was a hot mess. It was a hot mess. We take another look at here on long-winded Donnie reviews. We actually take a look at the different interviews, speeches, things along those lines that Donald Trump actually does. We break those things down so you don't actually have to. And today was an interesting one. Today was an absolute interesting one. Today, Donald Trump hosted President Vladimir Zelenskyy from Ukraine at the White House, and guys, I want to start off by saying I was embarrassed. As an American citizen, I was embarrassed. I was absolutely, absolutely embarrassed that Donald Trump did what he did, treated Vladimir Zelenskyy a hero the way that he did. But guys, we're going to get into it. We're going to get into it. As you can see, the actual bullet points, there's not a ton of bullet points, but there's so much content. And the reason why there's not a lot of points, but there's so much content is because it was a Q&A session. And with that Q&A session, let's get into it. The first thing that we have is big shouts goes out to, which of course Donald Trump started with the different thank yous and saying, you know, how happy he was to have people there. And then he started to go into how he's known Vladimir Zelenskyy for a long time. He then followed up by talking about how they had a spat. And I think this was the prelude to everything that was going to happen, right? Because Donald Trump spoke on their spat that they had, but then he doubled down talking about how they had a great rare mineral deal in place. And for anyone that doesn't know what they're talking about or what's going on with this rare mineral deal, so the United States and Ukraine has agreed to a rare mineral deal. As you can see here, if you want to check it out and get the full breakdown, you can go to csis.org, where it gives a full breakdown of the actual deal that is negotiated between the United States and Ukraine. But the gist of it is it's a $500 billion deal, where there's going to be money set into a fund. The United States is going to get access to rare minerals within Ukraine. If you want to get more information about it, go check it out. This is a great site that not only gives you a great breakdown of it, but it actually gives you a Q&A portion as well. But with that being said, he talked about that, and Trump tried to kind of focus on that and really continue to use that as the basis of what was going on. But you could tell the entire time by watching Zelensky's face, by watching his mannerisms, that something was amiss, right? But he went on to talk about how it's a good decision to have Russia and Ukraine make a deal, which again I agree, right? I mean, we definitely want peace in Ukraine, but I don't think that everyone wants the same type of peace that Trump wants. He talked about how that it was going to take money to rebuild, and then he talked about Biden, right? He really hammered in multiple times. You guys know that Trump can't help but talk about Biden. Like that's his guy. But he also talked about how Biden never actually tried to reach out to Vladimir Putin and actually make any deals with him. That's absolutely wrong. That's absolutely wrong. This is a great NPR article from December 2nd, 2022, and it talks about how Putin turns down Biden talks and defends Russia attacking Ukraine energy grid. Specifically, Joe Biden said in a speech he would be willing to talk to President Vladimir Putin if the facts there was an interest and if he actually wanted to talk to him and there was a way to end the war, right? So Joe Biden definitely showed willingness to actually sit down and have these conversations with Vladimir Putin, but Putin was not interested in doing that at the time. He wasn't interested at all until, you know, he got his puppet back, right? So as soon as he got his puppet back, then he was actually willing to do so. So from that point, we go on to what's called deal after my Big Mac. Donald Trump talked about the deal and how they were going to sign the deal after dinner. They had to go eat first. Donald Trump needed to get his Big Mac. He needed his ketchup. He needed to get all of that taken care of first. So he had to eat. We then moved on to what I call a hero sets the tone, where Vladimir Zelenskyy started to talk about his hope of an agreement, and he double, triple, quadruple. Guys, this was the theme of what he was saying. Vladimir Zelenskyy talked about how not only does he want a ceasefire, yes, but he wants security guarantees. And he has great reasons for saying that not only did he want a ceasefire, but it's a need to have security guarantees, right? And so he continued to talk about how he hopes that America would not stop supporting Ukraine. He spoke on understanding that Europe is ready to do whatever. He knows what Europe is going to do. So Europe has already had this conversation with him. He has an understanding of how Europe is going to actually back Ukraine, but they're waiting to see what the United States does. He, with his whole chest, and again, this is why I call Zelenskyy an actual hero. With his whole chest, he called Vladimir Putin a killer and a terrorist. No stutter, no qualms, no bones. A killer and a terrorist. He said that and he meant it, and that's what I'm talking about, Zelenskyy. He then went on to talk about how there can be no compromise with a killer. Say it again. Say it again. He talked about how there couldn't be any type of compromise, but then he also brought up the fact that the Ukrainians, they've gotten really good at making drones, right? He talked about the necessity for them to actually make drones because of the war with Russia, and they've gotten really good at actually doing so. Now, he did highlight how the United States has an amazing air defense, and he was hoping that the United States and Ukraine can actually make a deal where they share some licensing agreements and they can get more information about the actual United States air defense, and in return, Ukraine would give the United States access to their drone systems, right? So that was a hope of his. He then moved on to talk about how Europe is willing to support, but they understand that there's a need to have the United States support. And they feel like the actual support won't be as strong without the United States. It's a big deal, right? He then went on to actually do something that was really interesting. He told Trump about how Russia had been kidnapping kids. He told Trump about how Russia had been kidnapping kids and keeping them and changing their names. I'm going to just say Epstein files. I'm going to just say it. Zelenskyy, this was not the right one for you to go with Trump. Trump is on the flight logs. I don't know if this is the conversation that you should have had with him, because anyway, he then actually went on to show Trump these pictures of the prisoners that are being held in Russia, right? Ukrainian soldiers and people, not just soldiers. He called out how they have kids, they have soldiers, they have priests, all of this, and he showed Trump those pictures of those people who are in horrible, horrible shape. He showed him like the pictures of when they first were captured, and then the pictures of the most recent pictures, or even some that were that they got back, but it was really, really bad. So from that point, they continue to move on, and we move to something what I call, let's get ready to rumble. Yes, it was the actual Q&A portion of the conversation. It was when the media got an opportunity to ask questions. Now, before I get into the Q&A portion, guys, I just want to say, if you're watching over on YouTube, what up? Like the stream, comment if you could. Let me know that you're there. Also, I see you watching over on Twitch. What up, all my Twitchers? If you are there, drop some comments. I love you guys. Thank you for being here. And if you're watching this back later, make sure that you actually like the stream, leave a comment, 7 words or more, and also make sure you follow me on all of my social platforms. We have Blue Sky, Twitch, Instagram, and YouTube. Make sure you're following me on all of the social media platforms. So let's get ready to rumble. Trump started talking off by talking about the fund, right? Because the question was, are you going to be giving funds to Ukraine? Is there a deal in place to give funds to Ukraine? Trump talked about how funds will go into a trust or whatever from the agreement, the rare mineral agreement. So basically, he's saying, yeah, we're going to sign this deal, and then some of the money that we sign for the deal is going to go into a trust, and then they'll be able to actually use that money from there. He then talked about how he wants to make an agreement so there's no more fighting. He talked about how he's known Putin for a very long time. We know, yes, he has. But then, again, he went back to Joe Biden, which we all know that he can't help but to always go back to Joe Biden. He went back to Joe Biden and he talked about how the Biden administration just gave away money with no securities, but he also said that Europe only sent out loans, right? He said that Europe was only loaning out money and they weren't actually, doing anything except giving loans, right? So let's fact check it, right? Europe did actually give Ukraine a loan, right? But what you have to understand is this is a micro financial assistance, MFA type of loan, and there was a total package that was approved of $50 billion, which is about 45 billion euro, $50 billion, and it was a loan and grant package based off of the other European countries. And something I want to highlight here, out of that amount, right, out of the 45 billion euro, 33 was a part of the loan, but 17 billion was through grants. Now with that 33 billion, yes, it is a loan, but the loan comes with multiple conditions. It's highly protected on the Ukrainian side, and it's a long-term loan where even if the war were to stop today and they were actually able to start building back, it would be a long time before Ukraine has to start repaying that money. So it wasn't just that, oh, Europe is giving a loan out and they're not actually doing what they should be doing. So that wasn't true. Of course, here on Long-Winded Donney Reviews, we are always fact checking Donald Trump. Always. Never let it slide. And Donald Trump then, it was super weird, right? Some of the questions were super weird. Vladimir Zelenskyy, Donald Trump wasn't really trying to let him speak. President Zelenskyy had to actually jump in and actually make it known like what they were doing. He talked about how they want to get some GNL terminals built. They're really hoping to actually be able to do that. And he also talked about how he wants to put a focus on helping Europe, right? He wants to use those GNL terminals and help support Europe. So that's a whole thing. What up, T-Rex mom? And then Donald Trump went back to his old talking points, right? He started talking about how he said that, yes, okay, Europe did give money, but they gave much less than the United States, right? And he started talking about how the United States gave $30 billion. He's been repeating this over and over and over. The United States gave $30 billion. We didn't. This article is a great article breaking down how much money the United States gave to Ukraine. It gives more information about the different levels of support, and where Donald Trump is claiming that we gave $300 to $350 billion. In actuality, the U.S. Department of Defense, as far as the money that they have documented, as far as the money that they have, or the total amount that they have allocated to Ukraine, is $182.8 billion. Now, the Kendall Institute is an independent institute that actually tracks those funds and the spending and all of this other stuff. They can only account for about 119.7 billion. So there's still a huge difference as far as what the United States is saying that they gave versus what can actually be tracked. Now, it also goes into talking about, the money that the U.S. spent, how much Europe spent. And when it breaks down, this is something that I really want everybody to see. This is the percentage total of government support to Ukraine. The United States has supplied 42.7%. Other countries have supplied 7.8%. Europe has supplied 49.5%. So that is a long haul from what Donald Trump is trying to make as far as, who did what or blah, blah, blah. This also is a breakdown of as far as like government support and how that is actually done. One thing that I would love, love, love to call out to everyone is that Donald Trump harped on the amount of money that was being sent and said that that Europe was just giving out loans, but neglected to mention that also the United States loaned Ukraine some money that has to be paid back. So there's that. Of course, we know that Trump is always going to omit anything that doesn't fit his narrative. Doesn't surprise me. From that point, they continue to talk. Donald Trump talked about. It was a weird question from the reporter next. The question asked, like, basically, I just want to call out the fact that now that Trump is controlling which media members have access to him and who doesn't have access and all this other stuff, the questions are getting weird. So there's going to be multiple really weird questions. You guys are going to hear this. It's absolutely, absolutely weird. He then talked, he got a question and someone said, which former presidents would you compare yourself to, and basically which pantheon of presidents do you fall into? And of course, Donald Trump said that he was far more superior than George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. And then he tried to say, oh, it's a joke and people are going to take it and run with it, blah, blah, blah. Listen, there is some truth in every joke. There is some truth in every joke. Donald Trump might have been joking, but I'll be damned if he didn't mean that just a little bit. Maybe a lot of it. There's some truth, at least in his head, to the joke that he told. Then Donald Trump went on to talk about how there was he achieved tremendous amounts and that he would be able to end the war. Donald Trump again doubled down, tripled down, stood on it and said, "Oh, I can end the war." From that point, we had where Donald Trump said. He's talking about how this was a needless war and that it should have never started. And again, this is why I mess with President Zelenskyy. President Zelenskyy leaned in, said it clear and loud. Zelenskyy chimed in and said, he came into our territory. Donald Trump tried to make it seem as if there was, nothing that happened or whatever the case may be, or the war just started for no reason or whatever, right? But President Zelenskyy made it known that the reason why this war actually occurred is because, yes, Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. And I know there's been like a little bit of debate, or not even, it's a dumb debate, but people have been saying, like, oh, why can't you just say that Russia invaded Ukraine? Donald Trump can't say it. Donald Trump can't say it, but I can say it. I can absolutely say it. Russia invaded Ukraine. This actually speaks to it. You can find this information on unhcr.org. This actually talks about people still being forced to flee as the war in Ukraine continues. This actually goes through the different information as far as the war, when it happened, how it happened, blah, 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 blah. But something super important that I want to call your attention to. It's 3 years since a full-scale invasion of Ukraine and 11 years since the start of the war in the East and the occupation of Crimea. The war started when Russia annexed Crimea. If anyone is questioning that, if anyone is questioning who the aggressor was, who started the war, why it happened, let me clear it up for you right here, right now, and let me make sure that you understand it was Russia, and they started it with the annexation of Crimea. Period. Anyway, they continued to go on, and they took more questions, right? The next question, Zelenskyy talked about how someone asked, do they feel like Trump is on his side? Zelenskyy replied, very diplomatic, talking about how he feels like the United States is on his side, and he thinks that Donald Trump is on his side as well as on the side of his allies in Ukraine. He then talked about how he came there and how they need to stop, and how there's a need for the United States to actually help stop this war, and how only the United States can actually stop the war. He said that Trump and allies have to stop Putin, and they have to have him pull out of Ukraine. I mean, he basically he came in, he said it with his whole chest. It's going to be on Trump. It's going to be on the United States. We need them to actually pull out. He then doubled down and tripled down again and called Putin a terrorist, which he is, right? After that, Donald Trump started talking about compromise, and he said, because they asked, like, what type of concessions will have to be made? Will there be any compromise? That's what the reporter asked. Donald Trump said, yep, they're going to have to compromise. There's going to have to be some compromises. He then went on like this whole rambling point about bullets and how the land's flat, it's great for farming, and it doesn't stop bullets, but it's great for farming, all this other stuff. We know, yeah, we've heard this from Trump. We've heard it. Anyway, from that point, he continued to talk, and he said that he felt like there will be an agreement, or if there wasn't going to be an agreement, then he wouldn't be there. Someone asked the question, does Trump want to be remembered as a peacekeeper or someone that started wars? Trump said, of course, he wants to be remembered as a peacekeeper. He also said that he wants to be someone that's remembered for saving lives and a lot of money. He said money a little bit less, but definitely lives. We know what you meant, Trump. You care about the money. Keep it a buck. Anyway, he then said that he wanted to. He said that this actual war could lead to World War III. I don't agree with Donald Trump much, but I agree with him on this point. I agree with him on this point in the sense that I know for a fact that Putin isn't going to just stop. And unless there is a concise pushback on Russia, Putin's not going to stop. And if Donald Trump starts to side with Russia, which he is already doing, this is going to escalate. That's why today was absolutely insane. Anyway, so then he talked about how the election, he said he had a mandate and blah, 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 and all this other stuff. We've heard it all before. I've won by so many. I won this, and I won all the swing states, and blah, blah, blah. I got a mandate. Yeah, whatever, Trump. You don't. Smallest margin of victory in the last, I don't know how many years, but you don't have a mandate. Anywho, the next thing, again, guys, lots and lots and lots of weird questions. Lots of weird questions. And so the next round of weird questions came from apparently Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend, who's a reporter or whatever. Basically, he took a shot at Zelenskyy and asked why Zelenskyy is in the White House without wearing a suit. He said, why is Zelenskyy in the White House not wearing a suit? Zelenskyy replied about, maybe after the war is won, I will wear a costume. But as of right now, I have more important things to worry about than actually wearing a suit, right? I'm not even going to say anything. I'm just going to put a couple of pictures on the screen. I don't even have any words. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. I don't care about you clutching your pearls when that has happened and continues to happen. Stop it. Stop it. Anyway, Donald Trump went on to talk about how he said that he will send arms to Ukraine, and he hopes that there won't be a lot, because the question was around, will the United States continue to support Ukraine and send them military aid? He said he will send arms, and he hopes that it won't be a lot. He then talked about how Joe Biden didn't know what he was doing. Of course, again, he always talks about Joe Biden. That's his favorite. He also talks about how he didn't want to actually talk about any security agreement, any security deals, right? Again, remember, Vladimir Zelenskyy over and over and over and over kept hammering home the point that we don't want just a ceasefire. We need security agreements. over and over and over. He kept talking about it. Donald Trump pushed back on it. Was like, nah, I don't want to talk about it. He said security is the easy part. Okay. He said security is the easy part. He doesn't want to talk about it. He said that there could be some peacekeeping troops. He said the United States, we don't really need peacekeeping troops because we got the mineral deal in place and we'll have workers there, and that's just as good because you got to protect the American citizens and all this other stuff, right? He went on to talk about how he won't need a lot once the deal is signed, that the war will be over, right? Once they actually sign the ceasefire, that the war will be over. That's what he said. He then talked about, he took a question from someone from One America News, and he said that the person from One America News said that Donald Trump was brave for actually re-engaging conversation with Vladimir Putin. And again, weird questions because of the way Trump is trying to make this state-run media. It was just the weirdest questions, but Trump said, yeah, this is the pathway to peace, and I know I have to do this, and I'm a peacemaker, and blah, 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 whatever. That's how that went. From that point, he also veered off to Palestine and talked about how, you know, if he was in office, not only would Ukraine not have happened, but if he was in office, then October 7th wouldn't happen, and you know, all of this. And it was weird for him to have that conversation about Palestine while the leader of Ukraine was sitting in the Oval Office with him. I thought that was mad disrespectful, but that's Trump. And then Zelenskyy again had to jump in. It was the actual reporters weren't trying to talk to Vladimir Zelenskyy. They weren't. They wanted to actually talk to Trump because it's state-run media. They were throwing him softballs. It was a weird situation with weird questions, blah, blah, blah. Zelenskyy jumped in again and talked about how not only is there a need for a ceasefire, but there has to be security guarantees. And he said if there are no security guarantees, then there can be no ceasefire agreement. And he meant that. And he said something that was absolutely amazing. He brought to light the fact that Vladimir Putin has broken 25 ceasefire agreements. 25. The reason why Zelenskyy is talking about why there is a need for security agreements is because Vladimir Putin will not respect a ceasefire. He does not respect an actual agreement on paper. He does not respect that. He only respects force and pushback. I wonder who else doesn't respect, you know, agreements or wants to break agreements. And anyway, this is a great article from The Hill where they talked about the history that shows that no ceasefire or treaty with Russia can be trusted, right? It goes through multiple years, all of the years, different treaties, why Vladimir Putin has continued to sign multiple treaties as far as Ukraine and Russia, and over and over and over continue to break those treaties that he has in place. So yes, Vladimir Putin is a habitual treaty breaker. And that's why he kept drilling down on the fact that there is a need for not only a ceasefire, but you absolutely have to have security agreements. And again, Trump didn't want to talk about it. They continue to move on, and they talked about Trump said that there was never an agreement in place with him, and that's why, you know, there was a whole thing. Trump said that when he was president in 2016, it never happened. He said Zelenskyy jumped back in and said, again, I will not have any type of agreement without security guarantees. He meant it. Donald Trump went on to talk about how Putin was using, Zelenskyy went on to talk about how, again, Putin doesn't respect him or what they were doing there today, because as of today, Putin actually shot ballistic missiles and hit different places within Ukraine. And this is as of today. He said he doesn't want to stop. He talked about how, yes, Europe has his back, and Europe doesn't want to actually leave Ukraine hanging, but they also want reassurance from the United States because the United States is Europe's closest allies. So they talked about that. They then moved on, and Zelensky talked about the rules of war and said that since Russia was the aggressor, Russia would have to pay for like any of the rebuilding and like all of the damages that were caused by the war. And then Trump hopped in and talked about how he is in the middle of all of this. Donald Trump doubled down and said that he's in the middle. He's not on Zelensky's side, even though Ukraine is our allies, and he's not on Russia's side, which we kind of know that he is. But he said that he's in the middle, and he says he wants to get it solved. And he said if he can't do it, then they're going to have to fight it out, and who knows who would win. Donald Trump went on record and said that if he couldn't negotiate a peace deal, then Ukraine and Russia would have to fight it out, and he doesn't know who would win. One, Donald Trump told us that he was going to end the Ukraine-Russia war within 24 hours of being in office. So he's already said that. We already know he lied. But then, for him to say, knowing that Ukraine is our ally, saying that if he can't negotiate a peace deal, then Ukraine and Russia would have to fight it out, and he doesn't know who would win. You should be double, tripling, quadrupling down in supporting our allies. But of course, Donald Trump isn't going to do that. Donald Trump has no interest in doing that. No interest at all. None. None. He then went on to talk about Poland. He said Poland is in a tough neighborhood. Weird statements. He then also said something that I found that was super interesting. He talked about how the U.S. has a commitment to NATO. He talked about how the United States is still committed to NATO, which is interesting because we know that he's also talked about pulling out of NATO. He's also talked about, though, how much more the United States has done than Europe. He kept going back to that. We've already debunked that. We're not going to harp on it. We're just going to keep it pushing. He said it's unfortunate that Zelensky and Putin don't like each other. I think that's an understatement. He then said that Joe Biden was incompetent and he couldn't stop the war, and no one ever heard of. No, I'm sorry. He said Joe Biden was incompetent. He said that he could have stopped the war. He said that he stopped wars that no one has ever even heard about. He said it was between smaller countries, but it was still a war, and he stopped it. No one knew about it, but he stopped it. It's funny how Trump always does stuff that no one knows about and no one can actually verify or no one can actually prove, but he's always doing different things. I don't know. Anyway, Zelensky went on to talk about with negotiations. He said that the war, it's about Ukraine, it's about Russia. It's not about Russia and the United States. He hammered that down and really talked about how the fact that if there is going to be a peace agreement, it has to be an agreement that happens between Ukraine and Russia, and then of course the United States can have a seat at the table, and he also wants European countries to have a seat at the table, but it must be between Ukraine and Russia. We all know that Donald Trump has been trying to make this agreement between the United States and Russia, and Zelensky's not here for it, right? He then went on to talk about how other countries are afraid and they understand why, right? He understands why, and other European countries talk about how they used to be a part of the USSR, and Putin wants them back. Guys, we know this. Vladimir Putin has not been shy about the fact that he wants to reestablish the strength of the USSR, and he is out to do it, right? Trump then said that if he would, a reporter asked, would Trump go to Ukraine? And Trump said he doesn't want to go there. But Zelensky was like, oh, I was just going to ask you the same thing. Anyway, Trump said he doesn't want to go there. He said there's no building standing. And again, Zelensky, my newest favorite thing is how other world leaders are fact-checking Donald Trump in real time. Because the media here in the United States is letting him slide. They're not holding him accountable. They're just letting him rewrite history and all this other crap. Vladimir Zelensky fact-checked him in real time and said that's not true. Donald Trump said there were no cities standing. It was all rubble. Zelensky said that's not true. The cities are still there. Some of them are kind of thriving. Some of them are a little bit different. He talked about how like there's certain situations where kids are still going to school. If they're close to like maybe a combat area, some of them go to school underground. But the Ukrainians are still there. They're still living. They're still fighting. Fun fact as well. So afterwards, Zelensky went on Fox News and spoke with Bret Baier. and he talked about like what really bothered him, and we're going to get to that soon, and what really set him off. But he said the thing that really set him off is the fact that Donald Trump kept saying that the cities were leveled, that there was no way that they were going to win, that the people were dying, all this other stuff. And Zelensky said, you don't say those type of things when you're fighting a war, when you're trying to inspire people, when you're trying to show that you are actually doing, which they are successfully beating back Russia. They actually have taken parts of Russia. And so Donald Trump doing that basically undermines him and his efforts. Anyway, he then went on to talk about how Putin is telling Donald Trump these things. We know for a fact that Putin is telling Trump these things, right? We know that. We absolutely know that. And then Donald Trump, of course, an actual reporter asked Donald Trump when was the last time he talked to Putin. He said he talked to him a few days ago. We know you got to check in with your papa. You got to check in with Papa Putin. We know. But Donald Trump did admit that he actually talked to Putin a couple of days ago. And he said that he's known Putin all his life. Again, we know. He then talked about, this was something super interesting. He kind of went on and on and on about this at different points, how Putin went through the Russia hoax with him, and how Putin had to deal with the Russia hoax, and how Putin actually had to put up with all the persecution, all of the back and forth, like everything that came with the Russia hoax. It was amazing to hear him like admit it in real time, how intertwined they were. I don't know, whatever. And then he said that he was in the middle of a mess talking about Zelensky and Putin. And he said if it doesn't get solved, then it's going to take a long time. And then it started this weird thing, like a weird back and forth where Donald Trump said that the UK doesn't have freedom of speech. And then Marco Rubio doubled down and said, yeah, the UK doesn't have freedom of speech, and they're more worried about the United States citizens' freedom of speech being, limited and all this other stuff. And then JD went on talking about how it's really important to have Americans have the right to speak their mind in the public square, which is now online. We all know we know what they're talking about. They want these people who are, anti-vaxxers, who are super right-wing, who are conspiracy nuts, all this other stuff. They want them to be able to speak their mind and spread misinformation and disinformation. That's what it's all about. But just to fact check this, yes, you can find this information at amnesty.org.uk. The UK does have freedom of speech. And the UK Article 10 of the 1998 Human Rights Act protects our right to freedom of expression. That talks to the freedom of speech that is in the UK. Donald Trump lied, Marco Rubio lied, JD Vance lied. Now, the things that you do want to know is that, does freedom of speech have limits? You might not expect us to say this, but in certain circumstances, freedom of speech and freedom of expression can be restricted. Government has an obligation to prohibit hate speech. Listen, guys, anything that's dangerous, they want to actually mitigate those things. And Donald Trump, JD Vance, the Trump administration, they just want it all to fly. They want it all to fly, and that's what it all boils down to. They want those conspiracy theory nuts to be able to spread misinformation, disinformation. We know that's how they thrive. That's what it's about. Anyway, after going through that, Trump went on to talk about how that they don't need oil and gas from Ukraine, because someone asked would that be a part of the deal. He said we got plenty of oil and gas. He said that he is spoken to Putin and Zelensky on multiple occasions and talked about oil and gas and all this other stuff. He then said that there needs to be a deal, right? And just an FYI, guys, this is when the temperature really started to crank up, right? This is when things started to get a little bit, He went on to talk about how there's a need for a deal. He said there are some areas of Russia that Russians might have to actually pull out because of the rare earth deal, but he said it would be studied. He didn't say that Russia would just have to immediately leave those areas, even though Russia is currently occupying certain areas of Ukraine where the actual digging would occur, right? And so then another reporter tried to ask a question. Donald Trump realized the reporter was from CNN. He started to talk about CNN, how CNN needs to worry about their ratings and blah, 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 blah. He then talked about how both he and someone asked were they aligned, and he said that he and Putin are not aligned. He said he's not aligned with Putin, he's not aligned with Ukraine, he's only aligned with the U.S. And then he said that he's aligned with the world and he's aligned with Europe. Pick a struggle, Donney. Pick a struggle, because you can't keep talking out of both sides of your diaper. Whatever. He then went on and said that it would be tough to get a deal done, but he would get a deal done. And this is where it got interesting. JD decided that he was going to actually try to grow a set and actually try to check Vladimir Zelenskyy. And don't forget what the title of this is. Let's get ready to rumble. But right before that, I said a hero sets the tone. And from this point on, it was a 2-on-1 sparring with Zelenskyy, where Vladimir Zelenskyy took on both Donald Trump and JD Vance at the same time and laid the smack down on both of them. So JD Vance hopped in and said that there had been 4 years of a president that talked tough. They said that they needed a path to diplomacy, and it was more important for the president's actions versus the president's words, right? Talking about Joe Biden. Zelenskyy hopped in and said, "Can I ask you a question?" And JD was like, "Sure." And he said, "You talk about the fact that this happened under Biden, but we can go back and we understand that this happened under Barack Obama. Again, the annexation of Crimea. This happened under Trump. This happened under Biden. And now this is happening under Trump again." And he said that he hoped that this is where it stopped, with it just being, under Trump. And then he talked about how they have signed multiple ceasefires. Again, they've signed 25 ceasefires. And they talked about how even they had one in 2019 when Donald Trump was president. And again, Zelenskyy broke that ceasefire agreement deal. And he said Putin broke that one, even in a prisoner exchange, said he didn't give back the prisoners. And he said, "What type of diplomacy are you talking about, JD?" Not Vice President Vance, not Vice President. Zelenskyy looked him square in his eyes and said, "What type of diplomacy are you talking about, JD?" Boom! That set off a nuke. JD Vance then went back and started talking about how he's being disrespectful, and he came into the Oval Office and he's trying to litigate things in front of the American people, in front of the media. And he said that they're forcing people to actually go out on the front line, and they should be thanking Donald Trump. Zelenskyy hopped in and asked JD. He said, "JD, have you been to Ukraine?" JD Vance repeated, "Well, I've watched and I've saw the stories, and I know that you take people on a propaganda tour." And then JD asked if he had a problem getting people in the military, and then Zelenskyy, again, trying to answer his questions directly, and JD Vance kept on trying to talk over him. He said, "Listen, everyone has a problem with getting people into the military now, even the United States," which we know is true. And he said, listen, this is what set Trump off. He said, "The United States has an ocean in between them, and you don't feel it right now, but you will feel it in the future." And Trump shat his diaper. It got full, and he threw a full temper tantrum from that point. Trump got so upset, he got so mad and said, "Don't you tell us what we're going to feel. You're not in a position to tell us how we're going to feel." Trump said, "You don't hold the cards." Trump said that you're gambling with World War III. JD Vance jumped in and started talking about how he should just say thank you, and he hasn't said a thank you in a meeting. And then Zelenskyy calmly leaned in and looked at JD Vance and said, "Just because you're talking louder doesn't mean that you're right." And again, that set both of them off. Donald Trump starts yelling and saying, "He's not getting loud. He's not getting loud," even though they both were. And then he talked about how he talked about how Biden gave $300 billion to Ukraine, and it wasn't checked. Which again, we've already fact checked that. Zelensky said, "Yes, yes, I know, yeah." And JD Vance was like, "Oh, the war would have been over if it wasn't for the United States." And then Zelensky's like, "Yes, yes, I know you're spouting Russia talking points. It would have been over 3 days if it wasn't for the U.S. Yes, I know. I've heard Russia say it. Putin probably told you that." Yeah, he said it. Yeah, he said it. Yeah, W's in the chat for Zelensky. W's in the chat for Zelensky. Anyway, JD said, you need to just be thankful. You need to say thank you and moved on. JD Vance hammered in on the point that Vladimir Zelensky has never said thank you to the United States, to any efforts that we have given and all this other stuff. Now, guys, I say this all the time. And I truly, truly, truly mean this. X, Twitter, it's not a source. Twitter's not a source. Twitter's not a source. Twitter is not a source. But when it comes to actually seeing what people post, yeah, I guess it can be a source. So there are multiple occasions where Vladimir Zelensky has posted on Twitter specifically thanking not only the president of the United States at that time, Joe Biden, but also thanking the American citizens for multiple things that they have done. And he has actually done this 33 times. He even did it when he got an opportunity to address, oh, can't see this one. Oh, sorry guys, can't see this one. When he got to address Congress, but also when he was in the Oval Office and he met with Joe Biden, he also said thank you as well. So I say all that to say, JD was wrong and he lied. Vladimir Zelensky has been very, very appreciative of the United States, of United States citizens. He has said thank you multiple times. JD lied. Point blank, period. Then he went on to say that Donald Trump started yelling, said that that people are dying and they're running low on soldiers, and he said they need a ceasefire right now. Zelensky hopped back in again and said they need more than a ceasefire. They need security agreements. Vladimir Zelensky is standing on business, and he is not just going to take a ceasefire. He wants security assurance. He's not just taking that. Trump got mad and said, oh, you know what? I gave you javelins and Obama gave you nothing but sheets. He gave you bed sheets. You're talking about that, and the only thing that the Obama administration gave you was bed sheets while I gave you javelins. Surprise, surprise. Donald Trump lied. Donald Trump lied, and you know what's funny? This isn't even the first time that he's told this lie before. This article is from the AP News, and this is from March 27, 2022, talking about, he said the same thing. I was the one that sent javelins, not Obama. Obama sent blankets, right? That's what he said. Fun fact, no. Obama did more than send blankets, sent $120 million in 2015, and then approximately $75 million worth of equipment. And then there was a U.S. aid package, and between the point of 2014 and 2016, there was $600 million in security aid that was sent to Ukraine. So yes, Barack Obama did more than just send blankets. Who is surprised that Donald Trump lied? Not me. Are any of you guys? No, I'm not. Anyway, from that point, they continued to talk about how the agreement was going to be tough. It was going to be tough to make a deal. And then Trump talked about how, Trump talked about, Russia might have actually broken ceasefire agreements before, but he wouldn't break it with him because he's making the deal. He said that he talks to Putin a lot, and Putin is actually going to stick to the deal that he made. That's what Trump said. He's going to stick to the deal that he made. He said he talked to Putin, and Putin did no wrong. He said Putin did no wrong. He had to put up with everything that Trump was accused of, talking about the Russia hoax. He said Putin did no wrong. Mind-blowing, right? He then went on to talk about how he's empowered Vladimir Zelenskyy to be a tough guy, and if it wasn't for the United States, then he wouldn't be a tough guy. He said that he needs to make a deal or the United States is out. He then went on to talk about how he's not acting thankful at all. And he tried to tie it back up and said, well, at least this makes for good TV. At that point, it was over. It was explosive. It was confrontational. It was back and forth. I mean, Zelenskyy stood on business. Even at the end, Zelensky's posture was amazing. He gave a thumbs up. Zelenskyy made it known that he meant what he said, and he was about business, and he was about action. Which brings me to my last bullet point. It's okay, little buddy. J.D. Vance had to give Donald Trump a little pat on the shoulder and let him know it's okay. It's not that bad. You didn't do that bad. Listen, I'm going to end it with this, guys. I'm going to absolutely end it with this. What we saw in the Oval Office today was the most embarrassing thing that I have ever seen done in the White House. Well, what about Monica? Well, what about Thomas Jefferson? It was the most embarrassing thing that was done in the White House, and it was done by a sitting United States president. Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, the Trump administration, all embarrassed each and every United States citizen today in the White House, alienated one of our allies, emboldened one of our adversaries, and has completely driven a wedge into what Europe is trying to do to protect themselves against a dictator, Putin, who wants more control of Europe and who wants to establish the USSR. Donald Trump, in my opinion, is a Russian asset. Now, again, you can say, well, how do you say that? Listen, you can be a Russian asset willingly or unwillingly. And willingly meaning you can make an agree with them, unwillingly meaning they can force you, or you can just parrot Russian misinformation, disinformation. And at the very least, we know for a fact that Donald Trump parrots Russian misinformation and disinformation. It was wild. It was shameful. It was absolutely insane. And I just want to take a moment. I know Vladimir Zelenskyy is not watching my stream right now. Is not probably watching this YouTube broadcast back. But I just want to take a moment to say, President Zelenskyy, on behalf of all United States citizens, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you had to go through that today. I'm sorry that you had to deal with that person today. I'm sorry for everything that you're going through. And please know that everyday American citizens stand with you and stand with Ukraine, not Russia. Anyway, guys, this has been another long-winded Donney review. Thank you all for hanging out. Thank you all in the chat for hanging out over on YouTube, over on Twitch. If you're watching this back later, again, please don't forget to hit the like button. Make sure that you're following me. Not only follow me on YouTube, but all the social medias on Blue Sky, on Twitch, on Instagram. Follow me. Guys, I am going to go ahead and get ready to do some sparring. So if you are watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Twitch, I will be live soon sparring on TikTok. Debates, one-on-one debates with Trump supporters. Come and join me. I love you all, and as always, peace.